You were probably taught that the more money you save, the safer your life becomes. But in 2026, keeping too much money in cash can quietly make you poorer. Right now, inflation is rising faster than the average savings account pays interest. This means that a large sum of money can look exactly the same in your banking app, while buying less and less every year. Today, you will learn how much cash you actually need, where to direct the rest of your money, and how the simple cash ceiling formula separates responsible saving from expensive fear. And at the end, I will show you a 4-question test that will help you calculate your personal cash limit in less than 2 minutes. Here's the first mistake. People confuse stability with safety. Cash feels stable because the number does not change. If you have $30,000 in your savings account today, you'll probably see roughly the same amount next month. There are no red charts. There are no sudden market crashes. There are no headlines saying that your money lost 5% before breakfast. But the number in your account is not the same thing as the real value of your money. In April 2026, consumer prices in the United States were 3.8% higher than they had been 1 year earlier. At the same time, the average interest rate on a traditional savings account was only about 0.38%. Imagine a person named Alex who has $30,000 sitting in an average savings account. At an interest rate of 0.38%, that money will earn him approximately $114 over 1 year before taxes. But if the cost of Alex's normal lifestyle rises by 3.8%, he will need approximately $1,140 more to maintain the same purchasing power. The difference is slightly more than $1,000. No one withdrew that money from his account. There was no visible fee. The balance still looks safe, but part of what that amount can buy has already disappeared. This is the hidden tax on cash. It's not a real government tax. It's not a bank fee. It's the difference between how much your money earns and how quickly prices rise. Cash protects you from short-term emergencies, but it does not automatically protect you from long-term inflation, and that distinction changes everything. The goal is not to eliminate cash completely. The goal is to stop using it for jobs it was never designed to perform. Cash is excellent for paying next month's rent, repairing a car, covering a medical deductible, or surviving a sudden period without income. But cash is usually extremely poor at funding a retirement that is still 20 or 30 years away. The first conclusion is simple. You should not treat all your money the same way just because every dollar looks the same. So how much cash should you keep? There is no universal amount, such as $5,000, $20,000, or $50,000, that works for everyone. A freelancer with 2 children needs a different reserve than a government employee who lives alone and has no debt. Instead of choosing a random amount, divide your cash into 3 categories. The first category is money for everyday life. This includes rent or mortgage payments, groceries, utilities, insurance, transportation, and regular debt payments. For many people, keeping approximately 1 month of normal expenses in a checking account is enough to pay bills comfortably without constantly transferring money between accounts. You can also add a small buffer to prevent overdrafts or problems caused by differences in payment dates. But keeping 6 months of expenses in a checking account that earns almost nothing is not additional organization. It is money that is simply sitting idle.
The second category is money that protects you if your regular income suddenly disappears or a large, unavoidable expense appears. A reserve covering 3 to 6 months of essential expenses is often recommended as a starting point. Notice the word essential. Your emergency fund does not need to cover every restaurant visit, vacation, or subscription. It needs to cover housing, food, transportation, insurance, medical expenses, and minimum debt payments. A person with an unstable income, dependents, medical risks, or only one source of household income may reasonably keep a reserve covering 6 to 12 months. A person with stable employment, Two household incomes and low fixed expenses may feel comfortable with less. The correct size of your reserve is the amount that prevents a realistic emergency from forcing you into expensive debt. It is not the largest number that temporarily reduces your anxiety. The third category is money you plan to spend within approximately the next 3 years. A down payment on a home that you will need next year should not be invested in volatile stocks. The same applies to tuition due in 6 months or money reserved for replacing your car. Short-term money needs liquidity and stability. Depending on your country, taxes, and access requirements, this could include an insured high-yield savings account, a money market deposit account, a short-term certificate of deposit, or short-term government securities. The goal is not to chase the highest possible return at any cost. The goal is to earn a reasonable return without exposing a near-term financial goal to unnecessary risk. All the money in these 3 categories has a clear job. But what happens when your cash reserve is significantly larger than the combined total of all 3 categories? In a moment, I will show you the exact line between responsible saving and fear-based hoarding and explain why many financially disciplined people cross that line without even realizing it. People rarely keep too much cash because they are bad with money. They often do it because saving was the first financial habit that gave them a sense of control. Perhaps they grew up in a family where one unexpected bill could become a crisis. Perhaps they watched their parents lose a job. Perhaps they invested money once, saw the market fall, and decided never to take that risk again. Saving then becomes more than a financial decision. It becomes emotional protection. Having $5,000 feels safer than having nothing. Having $10,000 feels even better. Then the balance reaches $30,000, $50,000, or $100,000, but the person still does not feel secure enough to make the next decision. The goal keeps moving further away. The problem is not a lack of discipline. The problem is that the money has no finish line. Consider Sarah. Sarah spends $4,000 per month, of which approximately $3,000 represents essential expenses. She has a stable job, no children, and no major purchases planned during the next 3 years. She keeps $48,000 in cash because seeing that number gives her a sense of security. 1 month of normal expenses requires approximately $4,000. 6 months of essential expenses requires around $18,000. If several $1,000s for known annual expenses are added, Sarah's target cash reserve would be approximately $25,000. This means that the remaining $23,000 is no longer strengthening her financial protection. Her emergency fund has already been completed. That money is simply sitting there because Sarah has not given it another job. This is the difference between saving and hoarding. Saving means building an amount of money for a defined purpose. Hoarding means building an amount of money because making the next decision feels too dangerous.
This does not mean that Sarah should immediately invest all $23,000 in the stock market tomorrow morning. It means that she needs to determine which part of that amount is genuinely long-term money and develop a gradual plan. She could pay off expensive debt, take advantage of a retirement program with an employer match, direct money into tax-advantaged accounts, or gradually invest it in a diversified long-term portfolio that matches her tolerance for risk. The exact destination depends on her situation, but doing nothing is also a financial decision, and it has a cost. Indecision feels neutral because nothing visible appears to be happening. Inflation guarantees that something is happening anyway. Once all 3 cash categories have been filled, the excess money needs a new job. A useful order of action should not depend on which option appears most exciting, but on which financial problem is costing you the most. If you are paying high interest on credit card debt while simultaneously keeping a large amount of unnecessary cash, you are borrowing expensive money with one hand while protecting cheap money with the other. An emergency fund still matters. If you use every last dollar to repay debt, the next emergency may force you to borrow again. But once your basic reserve has been established, reducing expensive debt can provide a clear and immediate financial benefit. If your employer offers matching contributions to your retirement savings, refusing to participate may mean voluntarily giving up part of your compensation. The rules vary between employers, but the main question is simple. Are you keeping excess cash while ignoring benefits that are already available to you? Money that will not be needed for many years has time to survive short-term fluctuations. This does not guarantee investment profits. Markets fall, returns are not predetermined, and investing money that you will need next year can create a serious problem. But long-term goals and short-term savings cannot be judged by the same standards. Your emergency fund needs reliability. Your retirement money needs time and the opportunity to grow. Trying to make one account perform both jobs usually results in one of those goals being neglected. Even money that needs to remain in cash does not necessarily belong in the first savings account your bank offered you 10 years ago. In early June 2026, the average rate on traditional savings accounts was still significantly lower than the yields offered by some competitive savings products and short-term government securities. Rates change, so the most attractive option will also change. The point is not to transfer money every week in pursuit of a tiny temporary difference. The point is to check whether your bank is paying almost nothing simply because it expects you to remain passive. Money for everyday expenses must be immediately accessible. Your emergency fund needs liquidity and protection. Some planned expenses can be matched with short-term maturities. Long-term money needs a separate strategy. This is not about squeezing the maximum return out of every tenth of a percentage point. It is about matching every dollar with the correct time horizon. But there is one dangerous mistake that can destroy this entire system. Investing money only because someone on the internet told you that cash is bad. The final rule helps you avoid that mistake.
The first person has $60,000 in cash, $20,000 in credit card debt, no retirement investments, and no clear financial plan. The second person has $25,000 in cash, no expensive debt, a completed emergency fund, insurance, and money that is regularly invested for retirement. Who is safer? Most people instinctively choose the person with $60,000 because the visible number is larger. But a large cash balance can hide a weak financial system. The unexpected truth is that financial security is not the amount of cash you have managed to accumulate. It is the number of problems your financial system is capable of surviving. Cash is only one layer of that system. Other layers include controlled expenses, low debt, appropriate insurance, valuable skills, multiple income options, and long-term investments. This leads to the cash ceiling formula. Cash ceiling equals 1 month of normal expenses plus emergency fund plus money needed within the next 3 years. This is your starting target for the amount of cash you should keep. It is not a universal rule. It is not a perfect number. It is a practical boundary. When your cash balance rises above that boundary, you should not automatically spend it, and you should not automatically invest all of it. Pause and give that money a job. Cash itself was never the problem. The problem was cash without a purpose. Here's the test I promised at the beginning. How much does one normal month of your life cost? Include bills, food, transportation, insurance, and regular expenses. How many months of essential expenses do you need in reserve to truly protect your household? For many people, the answer is 3 to 6 months. With an unstable income or greater responsibilities, the period may need to be longer. How much money will you definitely need within the next 3 years? Include planned purchases, taxes, tuition, moving expenses, and other known obligations. And how much cash do you currently have left over after subtracting those 3 amounts? That final amount is your unassigned money. You do not need to move it somewhere today, but it does need a written purpose. Pay off expensive debt. Use the benefits available through your employer. Fund a long-term goal. Increase the interest earned by the money that needs to remain safe, or keep an additional reserve if your personal circumstances genuinely require it. The important thing is to make the decision intentionally. Saving money is not the enemy. Saving without a finish line is. Calculate your cash ceiling and write down the number today. You do not need to publicly reveal the amount, but tell me in the comments, were you keeping too little cash, the right amount, or much more than you actually need? Subscribe if you want to learn simple financial rules that help you save intelligently, invest simply, and build real freedom.